What if the CEO of the company you worked for walked into your workplace and saw everything? Not the polished reports or sanitized boardroom presentations, but the raw, unfiltered truth of a small gas station in Mississippi, where employees were trapped in a web of fear, exploitation, and silence. One humid afternoon, an unexpected customer stepped into Union Fuel Station 17, a woman who owned the entire company. What she uncovered would unravel a corrupt system, spark a fight for justice no one saw coming, and reveal a battle far bigger than one rundown station. Before we dive in, drop a comment below. What time are you reading this, and where are you? We'd love to hear from you. The late afternoon sun hung low over the horizon, casting an amber glow across the highway that stretched toward Jackson, Mississippi. Heat shimmered off the asphalt, distorting the view ahead like a mirage. Inside, a sleek black sedan, Claire Dawson adjusted her sunglasses and nudged the air conditioning up a notch. The steady hum of the engine was a familiar comfort, a small pocket of control in a world that rarely played fair. She'd been on the road for hours, weaving through the southern routes where Union fuel stations dotted the landscape like forgotten outposts. Owning one of the largest gas station chains in the country was one thing. Knowing how they operated on the ground, how her employees were treated, was another. Claire never trusted reports alone. At 55, Claire carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd clawed her way to the top. Born into a working-class family, she'd known struggle intimately. Her father's exhausted shuffle after factory shifts, her mother's aching legs from waitressing until dawn. These were the images etched into her memory. She'd fought for every inch of her success, especially as a woman in the cutthroat corporate world. That fight had shaped her, sharpened her, and given her an unshakable sense of justice. She glanced at the dashboard. The fuel gauge hovered near empty. Perfect timing. Up ahead, a faded red and white Union Fuel sign flickered in the heat. She signaled and pulled into Union Fuel Station 17. The station sat at the corner of a quiet intersection, flanked by a sagging convenience store and a cluster of run-down buildings. Claire parked beside pump number 3, stepped out, and stretched. The humid air thick with the scent of gasoline, hot pavement, and something faintly metallic. She grabbed the nozzle, started fueling, and let her eyes sweep the surroundings. Something was off. There was no chatter among employees, no casual greetings, no hum of camaraderie. Instead, the workers moved with a stiff, almost mechanical precision. A young man in a red Union Fuel uniform stalked a cooler outside, his movements sluggish, his face blank. Inside, behind the counter, an older woman worked the register. Her expression taut with concentration. Claire capped her tank and walked toward the store, the bell above the door giving a weak jingle as she stepped inside. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale, uneven glow across shelves of snacks and drinks. A coffee station sat in the corner, its pot blackened from hours of neglect. The air carried the faint stench of burnt coffee and something stale, like exhaustion baked into the walls. At the register, the older woman, her name tag reading Ellen Harper, fumbled with a receipt printer, her hands trembling slightly. Her short, graying hair framed a face lined with years of stress, her eyes darting nervously as she worked. "Afternoon," Claire said, picking up a cup and pouring herself coffee that looked more like motor oil. Ellen looked up briefly, forcing a tired smile. "Afternoon, ma'am. Let me know if you need anything." Claire stirred her coffee slowly, taking her time to observe. A few customers milled about, grabbing chips or sodas, but no one lingered. Ellen handled transactions with practiced speed, her eyes flicking toward the entrance every few seconds, as if expecting something or someone. The door swung open with a sharp creak, and a man strode in, his boots heavy on the tile floor. Broad-shouldered, with sandy blonde hair that looked like he'd raked his hands through it too many times. He wore a light blue button-up with sleeves, rolled up and a Union Fuel Manager badge clipped to the front. The second he saw Ellen, his expression darkened. "Damn it, Ellen." His voice sliced through the quiet store like a knife. "How many times do I have to tell you to move faster?" The store went dead silent. Customers froze mid-selection, their hands hovering over candy bars. The young employee outside glanced in, but quickly looked away. Ellen flinched, her hands trembling as she pressed buttons on the register. "I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett," she mumbled, eyes fixed on the counter. "Sorry doesn't cut it," Travis Bennett snapped, stepping closer, his presence looming over her. "You're too slow. Customers don't have time for your nonsense. Get it together, or find another job." Ellen nodded hastily, her fingers shaking harder. Claire set her cup down, her grip tightening around it. She'd seen workplace intimidation before hell. She'd fought through worse, but there was something particularly cruel about this. The way Ellen shrank under Travis's words, the way everyone else pretended not to hear. It was a performance of fear, rehearsed and perfected. Claire scanned the room, searching for someone, anyone, who might step in. The customers kept their heads down. The young employee outside busied himself with his task. No one would say a word. Her jaw clenched. This wasn't just a bad manager having a rough day. This was something deeper, something systemic. She wasn't leaving without answers. Claire took a slow sip of coffee, her eyes never leaving Travis. He hadn't noticed her yet, his focus locked on Ellen, who was struggling to hand a customer their change. "Every damn time, Ellen," he muttered, his voice dripping with contempt. "How hard is it to ring up a transaction?" Ellen's lips pressed into a tight line, but she said nothing. Claire felt a hot coil of anger in her stomach. She'd dealt with men like Travis before, petty, insecure types who mistook fear for respect. He wasn't just berating Ellen. He was making an example of her. A younger employee near the drink coolers hesitated, his eyes darting between Ellen and Travis. He looked like he wanted to say something, but the second Travis's glare landed on him, he turned back to stocking. Another worker, a woman in her 20s, arranging gum packets near the register, kept her head down, her movements deliberate, as if she hadn't heard a thing. That was what caught Claire's attention most, not just Travis's aggression, but the silence it commanded. These people had learned to stay quiet, to swallow their dignity. She wasn't going to be one of them. "Excuse me," Claire said, stepping toward the counter, her tone casual, as if she hadn't just witnessed a scene. "Do you have any promotions on fuel purchases today?" Travis barely glanced at her. "No." She tilted her head, a polite smile settling on her lips. "Are you sure? I've seen other Union fuel stations running discounts this week." Now he looked at her, annoyance flickering in his eyes. "This station operates on my rules. If there was a discount, I'd know about it." His tone was clipped, dismissive. He had no idea who he was talking to. "Interesting," Claire said, her voice light but probing. "And do you also decide the work schedules? Seems like a tough job, managing all this, making sure employees get fair hours, keeping things running." Smoothly, Travis narrowed his eyes, sizing her up. "What's it to you?" "Just curious," she said, letting the sentence hang, giving him a chance to dodge or confirm. He leaned on the counter, his posture shifting to one of control. "I run this place the way it needs to be run," he said, his voice low, almost smug. "My employees know that." There it was, the flicker of dominance, the way he spoke of them as tools, not people. Claire nodded, filing the response away. "Well, I appreciate the information," she said, stepping back to a small booth near the front window, settling in with her coffee. From here, she had a clear view of the store. Ellen's hands still shook as she handled the next customers. "Order," The young employee near the coolers kept his head down. Then, near the back, Claire caught a hushed conversation. "You worked until midnight again?" A young woman murmured, restocking snack bags. Ellen gave a quick, wary glance toward Travis before whispering, "It's fine. I just don't want to give him a reason to cut my hours." The girl frowned but didn't argue. Claire's fingers tightened around her cup. This wasn't a one-off. This was a pattern. Before she could process further, a sudden outburst shattered the fragile quiet. "I'm done. I quit." A young man, no older than 20, ripped off his Union Fuel apron and threw it onto the counter. His face was red with frustration. His hands clenched into fists. "I'm sick of this. Every damn shift, it's the same thing. Overworked, underpaid, and we have to deal with him." He jerked a thumb toward Travis. A female coworker gasped. "Cody, wait." "No," Cody snapped, his voice wavering between anger and exhaustion. "I'm done." Travis looked wholly unimpressed. "Throwing a tantrum? Go ahead, walk out. I don't need employees who can't handle real work." Cody let out a bitter laugh. "You don't need employees, period. That's why everyone's quitting." He shook his head, muttering, "Good luck keeping this place running," before storming toward the door. As he passed Claire's booth, their eyes met for a split second. She saw the exhaustion behind his fury, the way his shoulders slumped as the adrenaline faded. He saw her watching, really watching, and for a moment, it felt like someone finally cared. The door slammed shut behind him. Travis turned to the remaining employees, smirking. "Anyone else?" Silence. No one moved. Satisfied, he nodded. "That's what I thought." Claire set her cup down. She'd seen enough. As she walked to her car, the weight of what she'd witnessed settled in her chest. This wasn't just one bad manager or one employee breaking. This was systemic. She slid into the driver's seat but didn't start the engine. Her phone buzzed an email from the board, warning of declining profits and urging strategic cost-cutting. She ignored it, her mind racing. Travis had control here, but how? Why were employees too afraid to push back? One had broken Ellen so thoroughly. There was only one way to find out. She pulled out a worn leather notebook and pen, jotting down what she'd seen. Cody's outburst, Ellen's fear, Travis's indifference. Then she accessed the Union Fuel employee database on her phone. It didn't take long to find a lead, Tyler Hayes, a former night shift cashier who'd quit after 10 months. No explanation recorded. That alone was suspicious. Union Fuel had strict protocols for documenting departures. If Tyler's reason was missing, someone had erased it. She typed a message. "Hi, Tyler. This is Claire Dawson, CEO of Union Fuel. I'd like to ask about your time at Station 17. I understand if you don't want to talk, but I'd appreciate a few minutes. Please let me know when and where works for you." She hesitated, then hit send. Most people ignored corporate outreach, too distrustful or too scarred to relive the past. But her phone buzzed almost immediately. "I'll talk. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. A. Daisy's Cafe near the station. You're buying the coffee." Claire smiled faintly. "Fine," she replied. She glanced at the station one last time, its fluorescent lights casting a cold glow across the lot. Tomorrow she'd start digging for answers. This wasn't just a visit anymore. This was the beginning of a fight. The morning sun barely crested the horizon as Claire Dawson pulled into the gravel lot of Daisy's Cafe. A few blocks from Union Fuel Station 17, the air was already thick with Mississippi humidity, carrying the faint scent of fried bacon and freshly brewed coffee from the diner's open windows. The cafe's faded brick walls and neon open sign gave it a quiet charm, a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere of the gas station she'd visited yesterday. Claire chose a booth by the window where she could watch the street, her worn leather notebook open on the table. She'd arrived early, a habit born from years of staying one step ahead in a world that rarely gave women like her the benefit of the doubt. Her phone buzzed. Us. Curt reply from the Union Fuel Board, pressing for cost-saving measures to stabilize stock prices. Claire's jaw tightened. She'd deal with them later. For now, her focus was Tyler Hayes, the former cashier who'd quit Station 17 under mysterious circumstances. His quick response to her message last night had surprised her, but she knew better than to assume trust. People who'd been burned by Union Fuel and by men like Travis Bennett didn't open up easily. At exactly 9 a.m., the door swung open, and a man in his late 20s stepped inside. Tyler Hayes had the slumped posture of someone who'd worked too many overnight shifts. His dark hair unkempt, his eyes wary as they scanned the room. He wore a faded flannel shirt and jeans, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. When his gaze landed on Claire, he hesitated, as if weighing whether to bolt. She gestured to the seat across from her, offering a small, disarming smile. "You really the CEO?" Tyler asked, his voice low, skeptical, as he approached but didn't sit. "I wouldn't go around pretending to be someone with this much paperwork," Claire said, nodding toward her notebook and the Union Fuel logo on her laptop bag. He huffed a quiet laugh, then slid into the booth. A waitress, her apron stained with coffee, swung by, and Tyler ordered a black coffee, no sugar. For a moment, neither spoke. Claire let the silence stretch, watching as Tyler wrapped his hands around the warm mug, his knuckles scarred from years of manual work. She'd learned long ago that people like him needed space to decide whether to trust. "So," Tyler said finally, his eyes flicking up to meet hers. "You want to know about Travis?" Claire nodded, her expression steady. "Tell me what happened." Tyler took a slow sip of coffee, his face unreadable. "At first, it was just long hours. I was new, figured it was normal. But it got worse. If you asked for fewer shifts, Travis cut your hours to nothing. If you worked hard, he'd pile on more without paying overtime. And if you pushed back..." He shook his head, a bitter edge creeping into his voice. "He made sure you regretted it." "How?" Claire leaned in slightly, her pen poised over her notebook. "Threats. Not the kind you can report, but the kind you feel. He'd misplace your schedule, so you'd show up late and get written up, or your paycheck would have errors, hours missing, wages short. Took weeks to fix, if it ever got fixed. He never hit anyone, never screamed loud enough to get caught, but he knew how to make your life hell if you didn't play along." Claire's fingers tightened around her pen. "And corporate? No complaints got through?" Tyler gave her a dry look. "We tried. A few of us filed reports. Nothing changed. Then we noticed the complaints disappearing from the system. That's when we figured out about Paul." Her expression didn't change, but inside, something clicked. "Paul Whitaker, the regional supervisor." "Go on," she said. Tyler hesitated, glancing toward the window as if expecting someone to be watching. "Paul covered for Travis. Every time someone pushed back, Paul would show up, do a fake inspection, shake hands, pretend to listen. Then, nothing. Complaints got lost, schedules stayed the same, and people quit, one by one." Claire's mind raced. This wasn't just a bad manager. This was a system designed to silence workers. "Do you know how many people left in the past year?" At least 15, Tyler said. "Probably more. Sarah Mitchell, she was one of them. Tried to report Travis for docking her pay. Next week, she was fired for insubordination. No one's heard from her since." Claire jotted down Sarah Mitchell in her notebook, underlining it. "Why did you leave, Tyler?" He looked down at his coffee, his jaw tight. "I couldn't take it anymore. The stress, the threats. I had to get out before it broke me." He met her gaze, his eyes hard. So, why are you here? Why do you care? Because this isn't just about Travis, Claire said, her voice firm. It's about how many Travises are out there and how many Pauls are keeping them in power. Tyler studied her for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. If you're serious about stopping this, I'll tell you everything I know. But you better be ready for a fight. I am, Claire said, reaching for her pen. Let's start from the beginning. Asterisk. By the time Claire left Daisy's cafe, her notebook was filled with timelines, names, and details that painted a grim picture of Union Fuel Station 17. Tyler's account had confirmed her worst suspicions. Travis Bennett wasn't just a tyrant. He was a cog in a machine that profited from fear. As she drove back to the station, the morning sun cast long shadows across the asphalt, the air thick with the familiar scent of gasoline and rubber. She needed more evidence, something concrete, to expose Travis and Paul. Observation wasn't enough anymore. She was hunting. Union Fuel Station 17 was busier than the previous afternoon, with commuters streaming in for coffee, breakfast sandwiches, and lottery tickets. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their pale glow doing little to brighten the heavy atmosphere. Ellen Harper stood at the register, ringing up customers with mechanical precision, her shoulders sagging, her eyes rimmed with fatigue. Near the back, Nathan Brooks stacked cases of bottled water, his movements efficient but tense, his gaze flicking toward the counter every few minutes. Travis loomed near the register, arms crossed, surveying the room like a predator guarding its territory. Claire slipped her phone into her bag, discreetly activating the voice recorder. With practiced ease, she tucked it into an interior pocket, angling the microphone to catch nearby conversations. She grabbed a bottle of orange juice from the cooler and approached the counter, her expression casual. "Morning," she said, placing the bottle down. "You look like you've been working hard." "Long shift?" Ellen hesitated, her fingers pausing over the register. I worked last night. And the night before." "That's a lot of hours," Claire said, raising an eyebrow. Before Ellen could respond, Travis's voice cut in, sharp and authoritative. "She doesn't mind," he said, stepping closer, his tone casual but firm. "Right, Ellen?" Ellen barely looked up, her voice a murmur. "Right." Claire held Travis's gaze a fraction longer than necessary. His expression was controlled, but there was something calculating behind his eyes. He was watching her now, sizing her up. She took her change and stepped toward the coffee station, pretending to stir sugar into her drink while keeping her ears open. The recorder hummed silently in her bag, capturing every sound. A loud crash shattered the hum of the store. A gallon of milk had slipped from a young employee's hands, bursting open on the tile floor near the refrigerated section. White liquid spread across the ground, seeping under the shelves. The worker, a teenager with acne-scarred cheeks, froze, his hands hovering as if he could wish the mistake away. His face went pale. Travis's reaction was immediate. "What the hell is wrong with you?" His voice rang out, sharp and unfiltered, cutting through the morning bustle. The store went silent, customers pausing mid-sip or mid-swipe at the card reader. Every damn shift, it's something. If you can't handle stocking shelves, maybe you should find a job that doesn't require a brain. The boy's hand shook as he knelt, fumbling for paper towels. I didn't mean to. You never mean to," Travis snapped, his tone thick with contempt. Claire clenched her jaw. The kid had made a mistake, sure, but Travis's response was viciously disproportionate. She could see the embarrassment burning in the boy's face, the way his eyes darted around, knowing everyone was watching and no one was helping. That was enough. She strode back to the counter, setting her coffee down with a deliberate thud. "Loud morning," she said, her voice light but pointed, locking eyes with Travis. "Do you always talk to your employees like that?" Travis blinked, caught off guard, then smoothed his features into a controlled expression. "Just keeping things running," he said with an easy shrug. "You know how kids are. Give them an inch, they take a mile." Claire let the silence stretch. Waiting, she'd hoped for a hint of regret, a flicker of self-awareness. Instead, Travis doubled down. "Customers don't want to step over a mess on their way to grab coffee," he said, gesturing toward the spill. "Some of us have standards." Asterisk. The way he said, "some of us," was pointed, a jab at her interference. Claire smiled, but it wasn't warm. Interesting definition of standards. "I always thought good management meant setting an example, not humiliating people in front of customers." Travis's jaw twitched. "This doesn't concern you, lady." "As a customer, it does," Claire said, her voice steady. "I come here often, and from what I've seen, this place has a pattern of employees being afraid to make even the smallest mistake. That's bad for business." Travis scoffed, but something flickered in his eyes, uncertainty, maybe, or suspicion. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in front of others. "You're making a big deal out of nothing," he said, his voice smoother now. "Performative." He forced a chuckle, as if to dismiss her as harmless. "Just a little workplace motivation." Claire nodded slowly, holding his gaze. "Motivation," she repeated, letting the word hang. She took her coffee and turned toward the door, catching Travis's reflection in the glass. He was watching her leave, not just watching, studying. She could feel the weight of his stare, the gears turning in his mind. By the time she stepped outside, she knew Travis wasn't just a bad boss. He was a man who knew exactly what he was doing, and now he was wondering what she knew. Asterisk. Claire's hotel room was a sterile contrast to the grit of Union Fuel Station 17. She sat at the small desk, her laptop open to the company's internal system, scrolling through employee records for Station 17. What she found was alarming. In the past 8 months, over 20 employees had quit, nearly triple the turnover rate of other stations in the region. When she filtered by demographics, a pattern emerged. Most were older workers or people of color. Her frown deepened. This wasn't just Travis abusing his authority. This was systematic. She picked up her phone and dialed a number from the database. The first former employee she reached was Lisa Coleman, a woman whose voice was tight with hesitation. "I really don't want to get involved in whatever this is," Lisa said. "I understand," Claire replied, her tone calm. "But I need to know. Did you leave because of how Travis ran the station?" A long pause, then a quiet, resigned, "Yes." "Did you ever report anything to corporate?" Claire asked, lowering her voice. Another silence, then a bitter laugh. "Yeah, we all did. But nothing changed. Paul Whitaker always looked into it, then swept it under the rug." Claire gripped her pen. "You're sure Paul knew?" "Positive," Lisa said. "I sent him emails." Never got a real answer. Just excuses. Claire thanked her and ended the call, her mind racing. Paul Whitaker wasn't just ignoring complaints. He was protecting Travis. By late afternoon, she'd gathered enough to know she needed to escalate. She dialed Paul directly. The phone barely rang before he picked up. "Claire," he greeted, his voice overly polite. "What a surprise." "I doubt that," she said coolly. "We need to talk about Station 17. I'd like to meet in person." A slight pause. "I'm busy this week." "I'm not," Claire cut in. "Tomorrow morning, your office." Silence, then a begrudging, "Fine." She hung up, staring at the phone. Paul knew why she was coming. He was already preparing his excuses. The next morning, Claire walked into Paul Whitaker's office, a sparsely decorated space with a large desk and a single window overlooking a parking lot. Paul sat behind the desk, arms crossed, trying to look relaxed but failing. His gray suit was crisp, but his eyes betrayed unease. "Claire," he said, gesturing to a chair, "what can I do for you?" She didn't sit. Instead, she placed a folder on his desk and flipped it open. "This is a list of every employee who's quit Station 17 in the last 8 months," she said. "Most are older workers or minorities. Care to explain?" Paul barely glanced at the list. "Turnover happens. It's a tough industry." "Lisa." "Coleman says she filed complaints with you," Claire said, her voice even. Paul exhaled, leaning back. "Claire, I can't personally manage every station." "She says you ignored them," Claire pressed. His jaw tightened. "I looked into them. And yet here we are," Claire said, her smile cold. "Travis has his own way of running things, doesn't he? And some employees don't like it. But that doesn't mean he's doing anything wrong." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Then why are people afraid to speak up?" Paul shifted in his seat. "They're not." She let the silence stretch. Paul wouldn't meet her eyes. She closed the folder. "I'm going to investigate this further," Paul swallowed. "Claire, be reasonable." "I am," she said, turning to leave. As she stepped into the hallway, she heard Paul's phone buzz. She didn't need to hear the conversation to know he was calling Travis. That night, back at the station, Travis gathered his employees in the cramped office. Nathan stood near the back, arms crossed, avoiding eye contact. Ellen wrung her hands near the door. The others, cashiers, stockers, overnight clerks, shifted nervously. Travis scanned the room, his expression unreadable. "Something's going on here," he said, his voice slow, deliberate. "Some of you might have noticed." A heavy silence settled over the group. "There's someone," he continued, "who thinks they can waltz in here and tell us how to do our jobs. Someone who doesn't understand what it takes to keep this place running." Ellen swallowed hard. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "Let me make one thing clear," Travis said, his tone tightening, leaning forward, palms on the desk. "I run this store. Not some corporate executive who's here today and gone tomorrow. And if any of you think about talking to the wrong people," his eyes swept the room, landing briefly on Nathan before moving on, "you'll regret it." No one spoke. One by one, the employees filed out, the fear thicker than ever. But as Nathan passed Ellen, their eyes met for a split second. Flicker of defiance, buried but alive. The fluorescent lights of Union Fuel Station 17 cast a cold, artificial glow over the parking lot as Claire Dawson pulled in, the night air thick with humidity that made the pavement glisten under the streetlights. It was quieter than usual, with only a few cars at the pumps, their drivers moving sluggishly, lost in the monotony of refueling. Claire stepped out of her sedan, the glass doors of the convenience store sliding open with a hiss, releasing a burst of cool air laced with the stale scent of burnt coffee and something heavier exhaustion, perhaps, lingering in the walls like a ghost. The events of the past 2 days, Tyler Hayes' revelations, her tense confrontation with Paul Whitaker, and Travis Bennett's chilling threats to his employees had solidified her resolve. She wasn't just investigating anymore. She was preparing for war. Inside, the store felt different, the air denser, as if the fear Travis had cultivated had taken on a life of its own. Ellen Harper stood behind the register, her hands moving slower than usual as she bagged a customer's purchase. Her face was pale, her movements deliberate, each action seeming to require monumental effort. Near the back, Nathan Brooks stalked shelves, his shoulders tense, his eyes flicking toward the counter every few seconds. The space behind the register, usually manned by a younger cashier, stood empty. A customer muttered under his breath as he counted out change. "Where's the new kid?" "He didn't show up," Ellen replied softly, her voice barely audible, her gaze darting toward the door as if expecting Travis to burst through. Claire narrowed her eyes, her instincts prickling. She stepped toward the refrigerated section, pretending to browse while keeping her focus on Ellen. The older woman's hands trembled as she handed a receipt to a customer, her breathing shallow, her skin clammy under the harsh lights. Claire's chest tightened. Ellen wasn't just tired, she was breaking. The back door swung open with a thud, and Travis emerged, his boots heavy on the tile floor. His jaw was tight, his arms crossed, his eyes burning with agitation. "Great," he muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he glared at Ellen. "Another no-show. That's the third one this month. You'd think I was running a damn daycare." Nathan, still stocking shelves, didn't turn around, but Claire noticed his back stiffen. Ellen flinched, her fingers fumbling with the receipt printer. "If you people actually knew how to work," Travis continued, his voice carrying through the small store, "I wouldn't have to keep replacing you." Claire had seen enough. She walked to the counter, setting a bottled water down deliberately, her eyes meeting Travis's. "I couldn't help but notice," she said, her voice even. "Your employees seem exhausted. Are they getting paid for all this extra work?" Travis's smirk was automatic, dismissive. "And what's it to you?" "Just curious," Claire said, tilting her head slightly. "It's rare to see so many overworked employees in one place." Travis let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Lady, you have no idea how things run here. Then why don't you explain it to me?" Claire's tone was calm but unyielding, her gaze locked on his. The moment stretched, Travis's smirk faltering. As he studied her, the gears turning in his mind. Before he could respond, a soft clatter broke the tension. Ellen, in her attempt to hand a receipt to a customer, had knocked over a stack of paperwork on the counter. The papers scattered across the floor, fluttering like fallen leaves. Her face went white, her hands trembling as she reached to pick them up. Travis's reaction was immediate, his patience snapping. "Are you serious?" He stepped forward, grabbing Ellen's wrist before she could kneel. "You can't even do this, right?" His voice was a hiss, his grip tightening. "You're lucky. I don't fire you on the spot." The store went silent. Customers froze, their hands hovering over snacks. Nathan turned, his jaw clenched, but he didn't move. Claire's blood ran cold. She stepped forward without hesitation, her voice cutting through the stillness like a blade. "Let go of her, now." Travis's head snapped toward her, startled. His fingers loosened just enough for Ellen to jerk her arm free, stumbling back a step. He straightened, his expression twisting from shock to something calculating. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he demanded, his voice low, dangerous. Before Claire could answer, a gasp tore through the air, followed by the crash of something heavy hitting the floor. Ellen's knees buckled, her body crumpling as she gripped the counter for support. Her breathing came in short, ragged gasps, her skin ashen. Customers gasped, stepping back. Nathan rushed forward, his voice shaking. "Ellen!" Claire was at her side in an instant, her hand on Ellen's shoulder. "Ellen, can you hear me?" Ellen's eyes fluttered, her lips moving, but only a faint whisper escaped. "I'm sorry." Claire's stomach dropped. This wasn't just exhaustion. This was a crisis. She looked up, her gaze locking on Travis, who stood near the back, arms crossed, watching. He wasn't moving, wasn't calling for help, wasn't even surprised. His stillness was chilling, as if he'd seen this coming and done nothing to stop it. "Call 911, Claire snapped at Nathan, who fumbled for his phone. The wail of sirens pierced the night as an ambulance pulled into the lot, red and blue lights flashing against the glass storefront. Paramedics wasted no time, lifting Ellen onto a stretcher. "I'm going with her," Claire said firmly, her voice leaving no room for objection. As they wheeled Ellen out, Claire cast one last glance at Travis. His expression was unreadable, but his posture too still, too controlled, betrayed. He wasn't panicking. He was planning dot at the hospital. Claire paced the sterile hallway outside the emergency room. The beeping of machines and murmur of medical staff a stark contrast to the chaos of the station. A doctor approached, clipboard in hand. "Are you a relative?" "No," Claire said, "but I'm responsible for what happens to her." The doctor sighed. "She's stable for now, but she's severely dehydrated and exhausted. Her blood pressure is dangerously high." "Does she have a history of hypertension?" Claire nodded, her voice tight. "Yes, and she's been working excessive hours under stressful conditions." The doctor's lips pressed into a thin line. "That would explain it. If she'd pushed herself much further, we'd be looking at a stroke or heart attack. She needs rest and can't return to that environment." Claire exhaled slowly. She won't. As she stepped out of the hospital room, her phone buzzed with a new resolve. She dialed a number, the line ringing twice before a voice answered. "This is Ian Foster, Jackson Chronicle. I have a story." "For you," Claire said, her voice steady. "And it's big." Back at Union Fuel Station 17, Travis Bennett sat in his cramped office, the glow of his laptop screen casting shadows across his face. His phone buzzed Paul Whitaker. He let out a slow breath before answering. "Tell me you have good news." Paul's voice was tense, clipped. "You tell me," Travis shot back. "I just got a call from legal. Apparently, someone at my station had a medical emergency, and now corporate's sniffing around." "It's handled," Travis said, his teeth gritted. "Handled?" Paul scoffed. "If corporate starts digging, they'll find things you can't cover up." Travis leaned back, gripping the phone tighter. "Then we make sure they don't find anything." Paul hesitated. "What are you saying?" Travis's smirk returned, cold and calculated. "It's time we clean up some records." He hung up and turned to his laptop, his fingers flying over the keys as he accessed the station's internal system. One by one, he deleted payroll sheets, altered time cards, and erased schedules, every trace of unpaid overtime, every falsified hour. By the time he was done, the digital paper trail was gone. He leaned back, exhaling. Claire Dawson thought she had him cornered. She was wrong. Across town, Claire sat in her hotel room, her laptop open to the Union Fuel system. She refreshed the page, her heart sinking. All employee records for Station 17 were gone. She tried accessing past payroll reports. Error. File not found. Her stomach churned. Travis had anticipated this, had wiped everything the moment Ellen collapsed. He thought he'd won. She ran a hand through her hair, forcing herself to think. Without data, she had no proof of the manipulated schedules, the wage theft, the abuse. Her phone buzzed an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A distorted voice whispered, "Check your messages." The call ended abruptly. A new notification appeared, and Claire opened it, her breath catching. Attached were high-resolution images, payroll sheets altered, time cards, and, most damning, an email exchange between Travis and Paul. "Paul, you need to get rid of those complaints. If corporate looks too closely, we're both screwed." Paul's reply, "Relax, they don't know what to look for. I'll take care of it." Claire stared at the screen, a slow smile forming. Someone inside had turned against Travis Nathan, she suspected. She forwarded the files to Ian Foster, the journalist, and typed an email to Union Fuel headquarters, attaching everything. By the time she hit send, she knew there was no turning back. The next morning, Travis paced his office, his fists clenching and unclenching. The deleted files should have buried the evidence, but something gnawed at him. Someone had betrayed him. He slammed the door shut, calling an emergency meeting. Employees shuffled in reluctantly, their expressions wary. Nathan stood near the back, shoulders stiff. Ellen, still pale from her hospital visit, sat with her arms crossed, her face unreadable. The air was thick with tension, as if everyone knew something was coming. "We've got a problem," Travis said, his voice low, controlled. "Someone here's been running their mouth." His eyes scanned the room, daring someone to flinch. "Whoever thinks they can stab me in the back, you're making a big mistake." No one spoke. Then Ellen lifted her gaze, her voice quiet but steady. "You're afraid." Travis's eyes snapped to her. "Excuse me? You wouldn't be saying this if you weren't afraid," Ellen said, her words cutting through the silence. A ripple of movement went through the room, employees exchanging glances. Realizing she was right, Travis clenched his jaw. "You think she cares about you?" he snapped, gesturing toward the door, toward Claire's invisible presence. "You think she's here to help?" Nathan's voice cut through. "She was there when Ellen collapsed. You weren't." Travis stiffened, his face twitching. Without another word, he stormed out, the door slamming behind him. That evening, he stood in front of the station. A small group of local reporters gathered, cameras rolling. He'd called an impromptu press conference, painting himself as the victim. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, shaking his head. "Corporate's trying to take over my store, using lies to do it. I don't care about the workers here. They just want control." A few bystanders nodded, murmuring sympathetically. Then a voice rang out from behind the reporters. "Am I?" The crowd turned. Claire stepped forward, composed, confident, a folder in her hand. "I'd like to clarify a few things," she said, her voice carrying over the murmurs. Travis's smirk faltered. She opened the folder, holding up a printed email. "This is a conversation between Travis Bennett and Paul Whitaker, showing they were aware of employee complaints and chose to cover them up." Travis scoffed. "That doesn't mean anything." Claire lifted another paper. "This is a schedule showing falsified working hours, erased from the system, but saved by a brave employee." She held up a payroll document. "And this proves you've been stealing wages from your employees." Silence. A sharp intake of breath from the crowd. Travis's face paled, his throat bobbing. The reporters' faces shifted, realization dawning. The bystanders weren't nodding anymore. They were angry. A voice broke the tension. "That's a lie." Ellen Harper stepped forward, her posture weak but her presence undeniable. Whispers filled the air. She was supposed to be recovering, yet here she was. "You forced us to work off the clock," she said, her gaze locked on Travis. "You threatened us. Don't act like you were following orders." Another voice rang out. "I saw it too." Nathan Brooks stepped up beside Ellen, his voice clear. "You treated us like we didn't matter. But we do, and we're done being afraid." One by one, more employees spoke. "You made me stay past my shift without pay. You said I'd never find another job if I didn't obey. You laughed when we begged for better hours." Travis was surrounded, not by allies, but by truth. Claire stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "You no longer work here," Travis scoffed. "You think you can fire me just like that?" "I just did," Claire said, meeting his glare. Corporate security officers stepped forward. Travis jerked away at first, but as he looked around, no allies, no sympathy, his shoulders slumped. They led him away, his figure fading into the night. Paul Whitaker, watching from the back, turned away, his face grim. His career was over. The employees of Union Fuel Station 17 exhaled, relief washing over them. Claire turned to them, her voice soft. "This isn't the end. It's the beginning." The boardroom of Union Fuel's headquarters in Dallas was a world apart from the gritty, fluorescent-lit Union Fuel Station 17 in Mississippi. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, casting long shadows across a sleek mahogany table that smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive leather. The air was crisp with the scent of freshly brewed coffee, but the tension in the room was palpable. thick as the Mississippi humidity Claire Dawson had left behind. She stood at the head of the table, her posture steady, her dark blazer impeccable. But her eyes burned with the same fire that had driven her to dismantle Travis Bennett's reign of terror. Less than 24 hours after Travis's termination and Paul Whitaker's resignation, the board had summoned her for an urgent meeting. Claire knew what this was, a reckoning. 12 board members sat in a semicircle, their faces a mix of calculated neutrality and barely veiled hostility. At the center was Edward Marshall, a silver-haired man in his mid-60s, whose smooth confidence reeked of someone who'd never been told no. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, watching Claire like a hawk sizing up its prey. "Before we begin," Edward said, his voice measured, almost paternal, "let me be clear. This isn't about a single station in Mississippi. This is about the future of Union Fuel." Claire folded her hands in front of her, her expression unyielding. "I agree." Edward raised an eyebrow, as if surprised by her calm. "Then I assume you understand why this situation has put us in a difficult position." A few board members nodded, their pens tapping softly against notepads. "You didn't handle this the right way, Claire." She tilted her head, her voice steady. "The right way?" Edward spread his hands, feigning disappointment. "You went into a single store, personally intervened, and turned it into a national scandal. Our stock price is fluctuating. Corporate. Liability teams are scrambling, and now we're getting complaints from other locations. You started something you can't control." Claire took a slow breath, her eyes never leaving his. "You mean mitigate the truth?" A flicker of annoyance crossed Edward's face, but he recovered quickly. "This isn't about truth," he said smoothly. "This is about business. In business, perception matters more than reality. By taking this public, you've encouraged employees across the country to question their conditions. That's a liability we can't afford." The words hung in the air. Claire had spent years in corporate America. She knew how men like Edward thought. To them, the real danger wasn't labor violations. It was workers demanding more, the system cracking under scrutiny. She leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "I didn't start this. The way this company has been run did." A muscle in Edward's jaw twitched. Dorothy Reynolds, a sharp-eyed woman in her 70s, cleared her throat. "We all want Union Fuel to succeed, Claire," she said, her tone measured. "But your leadership style is unconventional. I prefer to call it hands-on." Claire replied, a hint of steel in her voice. Dorothy didn't smile, but her eyes held a flicker of amusement. Edward, however, had lost patience. "We don't run a charity," he said, leaning forward. "If we let employees dictate policies, higher wages, better benefits, more oversight, where does it end? Can Union Fuel afford that without hurting our bottom line?" "Yes," Claire said simply, her voice cutting through the murmurs that followed. Edward let out a sharp laugh. "That's wishful thinking." "It's strategy," Claire countered. She pulled out a folder and placed it on the table, flipping it open. "I had a team analyze the numbers. Travis's store had one of the highest turnover rates in the company. Constantly hiring and training new employees cost more than paying them fairly and treating them well." She turned the page, revealing charts and data. Stations with better conditions report higher retention, better customer service, and increased sales. Cutting corners on labor doesn't save money. It loses it. The room went quiet, the board members exchanging glances. Edward's smirk faded, his fingers tightening around his pen. Claire pressed on, turning another page. "If we implement a structured improvement plan, fair wages, proper overtime, anonymous feedback systems, we can address worker concerns while maintaining profitability. If we don't, we're facing lawsuits, declining brand reputation, and federal investigations." She let the words settle, then delivered the final blow. "And if we don't adapt, Other companies will. They'll take our workers and our customers. Silence. Edward opened his mouth, but another voice cut through. I agree with her. At the far end of the table, Evelyn Carter, one of Union Fuel's oldest shareholders, sat with her hands folded neatly. Her voice was calm but commanding. I didn't invest in this company to watch it burn through employees like they're disposable. She's right. We can do better, and we should. Edward stared at her, his composure slipping. Evelyn met his gaze without blinking. The power dynamic shifted, and Claire felt it. The board didn't reach a decision that day, but Edward's silence as she left spoke volumes. He wasn't done. With her not by a long shot. Claire returned to her hotel room, the Dallas skyline glittering outside her window, but her mind was far from the city's glamour. The boardroom victory was temporary. Edward Marshall's influence ran deep, and she knew he'd regroup. Her laptop buzzed with an incoming email from a regional manager in Texas, reporting operational challenges at Union Fuel Station 42 in Houston. The phrasing was vague, but Claire's instincts told her it was more than a logistical hiccup. She opened the attached report and froze. Employees at Station 42 were still being forced to work unpaid overtime, their schedules manipulated to hide the violations. The manager, Greg Harlan, had dismissed complaints, shrugging, "This is how it's always been done. People who want more can go somewhere else." Claire's fists clenched. This wasn't just resistance, it was a test of her authority. Managers like Greg, who thrived under the old system's unchecked power, were digging in their heels. She booked a flight to Houston that night, her resolve hardening. If she wanted her reforms to stick, she had to confront this head-on. The next morning, Union Fuel Station 42 hummed with the chaos of a busy urban hub. Unlike the quiet decay of Station 17, this location was modern, its pumps gleaming, its convenience. Store stocked with energy drinks and vape pens. But the atmosphere was familiar. Employees moved with the same mechanical precision, their eyes downcast, their voices hushed. Claire walked in unannounced, her presence drawing curious glances from customers, but no recognition from the staff. Greg Harlan, a wiry man in his 40s with a permanent scowl, stood near the register, barking orders at a young cashier. Claire approached the counter, where a teenage employee, Maria Lopez, scanned items with trembling hands. "Long shift?" Claire asked, her tone casual. Maria hesitated, glancing at Greg, who was watching. Yeah," she mumbled, barely audible. Claire nodded, filing away the fear in Maria's eyes. She waited until Greg stepped into his office, then followed, knocking sharply on the door. "Greg Harlan, Claire Dawson, CEO. We need to talk." Greg's scowl deepened, but he gestured for her to sit. "Didn't expect a visit from corporate," he said, his voice laced with irritation. "What's this about?" "Your station's schedules," Claire said, placing a printout on his desk. "Employees are working unpaid overtime. That stops now." Greg shrugged, leaning back. "We're just meeting demand. You want the store to run, don't you?" "Not by breaking labor laws," Claire said, her voice icy. "Implement the new policies. Fair hours, paid overtime, no exceptions." Greg's eyes narrowed. "With all due respect, Miss Dawson, you don't get how things work out here. Corporate's rules don't always fit." "They do now," Claire said, standing. "You have 1 week to comply, or you're out." As she left the office, Maria lingered near the coffee station, her expression hesitant. Claire paused, softening her tone. "Maria, right? If something's wrong, you can tell me." Maria bit her lip, then whispered, "I want to go to college. But I can't afford it working here. They make us stay late, no pay. I'm scared to say anything." Claire's chest tightened. She handed Maria her card. "You're not alone. I'll make this right, and I'll help with that college dream. Call me if you need anything." Maria's eyes widened, a flicker of hope breaking through her fear. Claire left the station with a new mission, not just to enforce reforms, but to protect employees like Maria who'd been silenced too long. Back in Dallas, Edward Marshall was moving pieces of his own. From his corner office, he made discreet calls to shareholders, painting Claire's reforms as reckless idealism. He leaked selective financial reports to business outlets, manipulating data to suggest Union Fuel was losing money under her leadership. Headlines bloomed. Union Fuel in crisis. CEO Claire Dawson's shakeup sparks uncertainty. The board, once reluctantly supportive, began to waver. Then came the ultimate blow. Edward announced he was gathering votes for Claire's removal, scheduling an emergency meeting to oust her. Claire sat in her office, the weight of the headlines pressing against her. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ian Foster, the journalist who'd broken the station's 17 story. Heard about the board's move. Need backup? She smiled faintly. Typing back, I've got this. She had two choices. Play it safe, compromise her reforms to appease the shareholders, or fight back and risk everything. She chose to fight. Claire flipped a script. Instead of battling in the boardroom, she'd take the fight to the people who mattered most. Union Fuel's employees. She scheduled a company-wide live stream, broadcasting to every station cashiers, mechanics, managers. Standing before the camera, she laid out her case. I stepped into Station 17 because I saw injustice, she said, her voice steady. I saw workers like you, overworked, underpaid, afraid. I fought for change because it's right and because it's good business. Happy employees mean loyal customers and stronger profits. But some want to keep things the way they were. I need to know, do you stand with me? She invited employees to vote anonymously on her leadership and the reforms. Within hours, thousands of responses poured in, a tidal wave of voices that had been silenced for too long. Claire exhaled, her fingers tapping her desk. The board meeting loomed, but she wasn't alone anymore. The Dallas headquarters of Union Fuel buzzed with an electric undercurrent as Claire Dawson stood in her office, the city skyline a glittering backdrop through the window. A laptop screen glowed with the results of the company-wide live stream. Vote she'd initiated, a bold gamble to let Union Fuel's employees decide her fate. Thousands of workers, from cashiers in Mississippi to mechanics in California, had cast anonymous ballots on her leadership and the reforms she championed. Fair wages, paid overtime, and a system to report mistreatment without fear. The numbers were staggering, a testament to voices long silenced. Claire exhaled, her fingers brushing the edge of her desk. The board meeting was hours away, and Edward Marshall was walking into a fight he couldn't win at the boardroom. The air was thick with anticipation. The same polished mahogany table and leather chairs, now a battleground. Edward Marshall sat at the head, his silver hair catching the light, his confidence unshaken as he addressed the 12 board members. This company isn't a democracy, he said, his voice sharp. It's a business. Claire Dawson has single-handedly destabilized it with her reckless reforms. I move to remove her as CEO. Murmurs rippled through the room, some nods of agreement, others hesitant glances. Claire stood, her presence commanding, and placed a file on the table. Before you vote, she said, her voice unwavering. You should see this. She opened the file, revealing a single page. These are the results of the company-wide vote. 87% of Union Fuel employees support my leadership and the changes I'm making. The room fell silent. Board members leaned forward, eyes scanning the numbers. 87%. Hundreds of stations, thousands of workers, a tidal wave of loyalty that dwarfed Edward's shareholder coalition. Dorothy Reynolds, her sharp eyes gleaming, broke the silence. That's not just a vote. That's power. Edward's face tightened, his fingers gripping his pen. "Numbers don't change facts," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Shareholders won't stand for this." "They will," Evelyn Carter interjected, her voice steady. "Remove Claire now, and you'll face a PR disaster. The public knows her story. Station 17, the workers' fight. You can't ignore that." The board members exchanged looks, the weight of the decision shifting. Edward had miscalculated. Shareholders could be swayed by profit, but not at the cost of a media firestorm. The vote to remove Claire failed, the motion crumbling under the sheer force of employee support. Edward leaned back, defeated, but his parting words were a quiet warning. "You've won today, Claire. But the system isn't built for people like you. It'll push back." Claire met his gaze, unflinching. "Then I'll push harder." Weeks later, the courtroom in Jackson, Mississippi, was a stark contrast to the corporate grandeur of Dallas. The air was heavy with the rustle of papers and the low hum of anticipation. Travis Bennett sat at the defendant's table, his once smug demeanor reduced to a hollow shell. His suit, once crisp, hung loosely, the bags under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. The judge, a stern woman with gray streaks in her hair, flipped through the final verdict, her voice cutting through the silence. "Mr. Bennett, this court has reviewed extensive evidence of wage theft, falsified records, and labor law violations. Your actions exploited employees and endangered their well-being." Travis stared ahead, his hands clenched into fists. The judge continued, "You are sentenced to pay restitution to affected employees, perform 1,500 hours of community service, and are permanently barred from holding management positions in the service industry." A murmur swept through the room. Claire, seated a few rows back, felt a wave of closure. Travis's fall was complete. His career, his influence, his arrogance reduced to nothing. No one felt sorry for him. Paul Whitaker's fate was equally grim. After his forced resignation, a class-action lawsuit from former employees, backed by labor rights groups, targeted his complicity in Travis's schemes. Stripped of corporate benefits and shunned by the industry, Paul became a cautionary tale, his name synonymous with negligence. The Jackson Chronicle ran a scathing expose, ensuring no company would touch him. Union Fuel Station 17, once a symbol of fear, was unrecognizable when Claire visited one last time. The fluorescent lights still buzzed, but the air felt lighter, the scent of burnt coffee replaced by the aroma of fresh pastries from a new vendor. Ellen Harper stood at the register, counting change with a smile Claire had never seen before. Compensated for years of unpaid labor, Ellen moved with a quiet confidence, her eyes no longer darting toward the door. "Feels different, doesn't it?" Claire asked, leaning against the counter. Ellen chuckled, a sound warm and unguarded. "I don't feel like I'm looking over my shoulder anymore." She paused, her voice softening. "My son, he's sick, you know? The money you got me, it's helping with his treatment." "Thank you." Claire's throat tightened. She nodded, unable to find words. Nearby, Nathan Brooks, now the station manager, oversaw a delivery with calm authority. Gone was the tense, silent young man who'd feared Travis's wrath. "I'm running this place right," he told Claire, his voice firm. "No fear, no lies, just respect." Claire believed him. The employees weren't surviving, they were thriving. As she stepped outside, the Mississippi sun cast a golden glow over the lot. The station no longer a prison, but a beacon of possibility. Claire Dawson didn't set out to be a revolutionary, a CEO, a businesswoman. She'd fought her way up in a system that wasn't built for people like her daughter of a factory worker and a waitress, a woman who refused to look away from injustice. When she saw exploitation with her own eyes, she had a choice: ignore it or change it. She chose to fight. Her story isn't just about one gas station. It's about power, who holds it, who suffers under it, and what happens when someone dares. to challenge it. But the question lingers. How many other places are like Union Fuel Station 17? How many workers remain unheard, afraid, trapped in systems that profit from their silence? Claire's battle isn't over, and perhaps ours isn't either. What do you think? Can one person change a system this vast, or does real change demand more? Share your thoughts in the comments below. This story is a testament to the power of human resilience and collective action. It teaches us that justice begins with seeing the unseen, that courage can spark from the smallest act of defiance, and that systems, no matter how entrenched, can bend under the weight of truth. Claire, Ellen, Nathan, they remind us that every voice matters, that standing together can topple even the most stubborn hierarchies. At Legacy Stories, we're committed to bringing you tales that challenge power, expose injustice, and inspire change. Subscribe to our channel to join us on this journey, because stories like these are just the beginning.